Welcome to the Notice of Closure training. This training is created for workers' compensation claims processors who process Notice of Closure forms, also called NOCs. This training takes approximately 15 minutes and is brought to you by the Oregon Workers' Compensation Division Claims Unit. By the end of this training, you will learn how to correctly process regular and rescinding notices of closure. To help understand best practices, you will learn about the rules and statutes that regulate NOCs and the codes related to the different notice types. We will also walk through examples of when to use each type of notice. In this training, we will focus on regular and rescinding NOCs only. By following the guidance in this training, you will avoid 873s, which are requests from the division asking for additional information or corrections. This slide shows the statute and rules that are related to notices of closure. The Notice of Closure Process Overview is found in Oregon Revised Statute 656.268. The details about responsibilities and requirements can be found in Oregon Administrative Rules, Chapter 436, Division 30, Rules 0015, Insurer Responsibility, 0020, Requirements for Claim Closures, and 0023, Correcting and Rescinding Closures. When we look more closely at OAR 436-030-0005, Section 11, we see that notice of closure means a notice to the worker, estate, or beneficiary issued by the insurer to A. Close an accepted disabling claim, including fatal claims, B. Correct, rescind, or rescind and reissue a notice of closure previously issued, or C. Reduce permanent total disability to permanent partial disability. There are 4 types of NOCs, depending on your need. These NOC types include regular closure. This is the most common type of claim closure. This is most often used when you're closing a claim, whether it's the first time or after a reopening of any kind. Rescinding closure. Sometimes an adjuster will receive information after a claim has been closed that clarifies that it was not actually ready for claim closure. This is when a rescinding NOC would be issued. It's important to note that a rescinding NOC must be issued before the appeal period for the original closure expires. Workers have 60 days from the mailing date of the original closure to appeal. If there is a request for reconsideration of the notice of closure, the rescinding NOC must be issued on or before the date the director receives the request. Correcting closure. This type of claim closure is used when an error has been made in the closure and a correction to the regular closure must be made, but does not change the closure status or action taken by the NOC being corrected. A common example of when you may issue a correcting closure is when a claims examiner closed a claim using a regular closure, but later received an 873 letter notifying the claims processor of an issue with the claim closure. This could be something like the closure is missing required information. The final type is a rescind and reissue NOC. These can be used when rescinding and reissuing a NOC can be accomplished at the same time. The claim remains closed, and other provisions of Chapter 436 rules have been met. For example, a rescind and reissue can be used when a NOC awarded temporary disability only, but the insurer later learns there should also be an award of permanent partial disability. We'll discuss corrections and rescind and reissue closures in a different training class. Today's course will focus on regular and rescinding closures only. When submitting a notice of closure, it's important that you select the correct notice type, also known as order type, so that the claim is identified and processed correctly. The type of notice can potentially identify additional programs or benefits available to the person whose claim you are processing. You can see a list of notice types on this slide relating to regular and rescinding NOCs. The notice types are broken into categories to make it easier for you to select the correct notice type. For example, if you're processing a fatality with time loss, you can find that notice type under regular closures, fatal, unrelated death. There is a handout that goes along with this training that identifies all available notice types. A regular notice of closure includes 4 documents: Forms 1644, 2807A, and 1503, as well as an updated Notice of Acceptance at Closure, a UNOA. A UNOA is a letter written by the processor. There's not a specific form for this. These 4 documents make up a packet of information that closes the claim, and all 4 are required to be submitted to the division. This is the final step in processing a claim. The information included in the NOC packet is determined based on the notice type. There is a required fields handout included with this training that identifies the fields that need to be completed for each form in the NOC package. A rescinding notice of closure includes only 3 forms: 1644R, 2807A, and 1503. These forms make up a packet of information that rescinds the closure and reopens the claim. The next few slides will cover common issues we see in the claims unit when processing NOCs. There are some common issues we see when processing NOCs. Let's start with Form 1644. Aggravation right end date issues. The aggravation right's end date should be 5 years after one of the following: the mail date of the first closure for a disabling claim, or the date of injury if the claim was classified as non-disabling for at least 1 year after the date of acceptance. Temporary total disability or temporary partial disability date issues. These include: the temporary disability start date is before the date of injury, the temporary disability end date is after the medically stationary date or after the date the claim qualified for closure, and the start and end dates are out of sequence. For these issues, the division will send an 873 letter requesting you send a corrected NOC on Form 1644C to correct either one or both dates. Date of injury changes. If the date of injury is changed on the NOC, you should add an explanation on the bottom of Form 1503 stating why the change was made. This will save time and avoid phone calls asking for clarification. Common issues we see on Form 1644R are also related to confusion about dates. Box 1 is the date the rescinding notice was mailed, while Box 2 is the mailing date for the notice of closure that is being rescinded. The Notice of Closure worksheet, Form 2807A, is most often missed in the NOC package. This is a required form. If it's missing, we will send an 873 letter requesting it be submitted. A frequent issue we see when we receive Form 2807A is that awards are calculated incorrectly. Calculations are shown in boxes 5 through 9. In most cases, the errors are due to incorrect math. Be sure to double-check your work when completing this form. A common wage issue is using the wrong state average weekly wage in Box 6. The dollar amount for this changes yearly and is based on the date of injury. See Bulletin 111 for the correct amount. Another issue related to wages is not using the correct wage to calculate the work disability benefit in Box 7. In Box 7, the work disability benefit is calculated using the worker's weekly wage. However, there is a minimum and maximum amount for the worker's wage. We sometimes see that an incorrect minimum or maximum wage was used. The minimum and maximum wage for work disability calculations is established by OAR 436-035-0009, Section 6, and is based on the date of injury. The minimum wage is 50% of the state average weekly wage at the time of injury. The maximum wage is 133% of the state average weekly wage at the time of injury. Current and past state average weekly wages can be found in Bulletin 111. One of the most common issues seen with Form 1503 are blank fields. We see this especially in Sections 2 and 3. In Section 2, you must enter the weeks and days in every case. Even if the number of days or weeks is 0, you must still enter 0. If the total medical costs paid are left blank, an 873 will be mailed out requesting the information. An amount is required, even if the amount is $0. If the total medical cost is listed as $0 and more than 50 days of TTD or TPD were granted, an 873 letter will be mailed out requesting verification. You can avoid receiving an 873 by entering a comment into the explanation box on Form 1503. Should you receive an 873 and no medical bills have been received or paid at closure, simply respond that there were no medical costs to report. If a new amount has come in by the time you receive the 873, you can list the new amount in your response. The other common issue with Form 1503 is unchecked boxes in Section 3. Section 3 has 4 quadrants, and each quadrant must have one box checked. An exception is when the claim is closed for administrative reasons, box Y under Release to Work type. Then all other parts of Section 3 may be blank, as shown on the screen. Be sure that the explanation section states Current Work Status Unknown. The final document used for a regular NOC is the Updated Notice of Acceptance at Closure, or UNOA. This is not a specific form provided by the division. Instead, it's a letter created by the claim processor. Because this is not a specific division form, it's sometimes left out of the NOC package. While the UNOA is not required for a rescinding closure, it is required for all regular closures. Be aware that all accepted conditions from the claim must be listed on this document. We sometimes see UNOAs that are missing some of the accepted conditions from the claim. You must also include denied conditions that were the basis for the opening of the claim or that have been appealed. This includes denied conditions ordered to be accepted through litigation and are under appeal. In some instances, the wrong worker's UNOA is provided. Be sure that all of the paperwork provided in the NOC package is for the same worker. Now that we've looked at some common issues with NOC documentation, let's look at some examples of when to use a regular NOC. Medically stationary. Alex is a claims examiner who recently received a letter from the attending physician stating a claimant's lumbar sprain was medically stationary. Alex will now prepare to issue a notice of closure, provided there are sufficient findings for purposes of determining permanent partial disability, if any. Fatal closure. This is when a worker was killed on the job. After completing all of the normal claim processing, Alex will issue a notice of closure using order type 1100 or 1101. In this case, the status is considered to be medically stationary. Unrelated death closure. A worker filed a workers' compensation claim, and while the worker had an open claim, they died of unrelated causes. Provided that the insurer has sufficient finding for purposes of establishing permanent partial disability, if any, due to the compensable injury, Alex would then issue a completed NOC with an order type of 1120 or 1121. While the claim may not have been considered medically stationary when the worker was alive, their death changes the claim status to medically stationary. Administrative closure. A worker has not sought medical treatment for 30 days, and the requirements for administrative claim closure under OAR 436-030-0034 have been met. Therefore, Alex may now issue a NOC. The most common reason for issuing a rescinding NOC is when the claim was closed as medically stationary, but it turned out not to be. In this example, our claims examiner, Alex, recently closed a claim for a work injury after receiving a letter from the attending physician stating the lumbar sprain was medically stationary. However, 3 days after the NOC was sent to the parties, Alex received a chart note from the attending physician stating that not all the accepted conditions were in fact medically stationary. Therefore, Alex had to rescind the NOC issued earlier that week since the worker was still being treated for some of the accepted conditions of the compensable injury. As a reminder, a rescinding NOC must be issued before the appeal period for the original closure expires. It must also be issued on or before the date the director receives a reconsideration request. We hope today's training has helped you determine when and how to correctly submit regular and rescinding NOCs. For more information, call the Claims Unit for the Workers' Compensation Division at 503-947-7596 or email us at the address listed on this slide and in the video description below. Thank you for attending this training.